Well, today we just wanted to kind of talk about what you can do if someone in your family or yourself is struggling with back pain. Not specifically like our training system, but just some simple tips. And like you said when you got on that you're sitting on the floor, that's probably the first thing that we would talk about is how are you resting throughout the day, whether it's standing or the actual resting postures. So the chairs are a huge factor in adding to back pain, right? We sit in chairs for hours and hours a day, and it starts when we're like kindergartners and they force us into chairs, and then say if you're not sitting still, like you get in trouble, right? So it's just a thing that's been locking us up for years. So what I first say is just cut out 10 or 20 minutes of chair resting with some floor resting, or even just if you would usually sit down to watch TV or whatever. I mean, you can pace around if you want, but floor resting or just standing, walking around, those things are going to be exponentially better than sitting in chairs. And then the next thing we'd go into is um, what do you think, Joe? What's next? What's the next most important thing?
Well, one thing that is really good just for being conscious that I talk to everyone about is standing posture. So we'll sit in these chairs for a long time. We'll develop these certain shapes, right? Crooked foot, hips forward, rounded back, and we'll actually translate that to how we stand. So most people, they'll stand in a very similar way to how they rest all the time. So when they're standing and you see someone crooked feet, hips are going to be pushed forward, and they're going to have this like kind of round with the back like this. What I would tell them then is if you're experiencing pain, a good thing to be conscious about is let's try to be conscious and fix our alignment when we're standing. Let's straighten the feet out. Let's try and get the hips back some. Let's get those shoulders back instead of letting them round forward a whole bunch. Those kind of things that when you build awareness over time, it starts to become more and more natural. And then before you know it, your standing posture is much better too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that a lot of people in our space talk about a lot is how your shoulders should be setting. And when we're sitting and we're rolled forward all the time, obviously that's not good. We don't want our shoulders to be able to see each other in front, but we also don't really want to like pin everything back either, like violently, because that's going to bring us into that rib flare issue that we see, causing compression in that upper mid back. So really what I tell people is like when we're setting our shoulders in the exercises, when you bring that in, you want your elbows to be sitting just like in line with the front of your uh like your belly. Like you don't want them pinned back and you don't want them rolled forward, but you want those elbows sitting here and act like you're like grabbing a steering wheel. And that's just going to set our shoulder blades not pinned together and not pulled way apart. It's more in that neutral position that they can move both ways, right? Because we need to be able to push our shoulder blades apart and bring them together for movement purposes, but we want to tension them in this neutral area. And I don't like to use the word neutral, right? Because movement is a continuum. There's no middle, but when we're talking about standing posture and we're not actually moving, that's how we want to be tensioning ourselves. So, and then yeah, another thing, get those hips back, right? It's that's just how our body's designed to work. When you look at little kids walking around, I'm actually gonna post a reel about this today. We were hiking, Joe, and I was like, Joe, I've noticed that your hips are behind your ribs when you're hiking. Why is that? And you just turn around and you're like, well, it's proper alignment, and that comes from tension. So yeah, it's just that's how we keep that backside of our body long and strong without uh thrusting the hips or tucking that tail or flaring the ribs, and those are all just compensation patterns. um and then yeah, like you touched on it a little bit too, the foot position. Crooked feet, if your feet are pointing away from each other, it's just going to play into foot collapse. when we start moving and when you're resting too. So just having your first or second toe straight, that's just setting yourself up for success. And how we can lock our feet in. And your feet don't have to be like completely tensioned when you're standing, right? We can have our heel down. We think of the heel as a kickstand for rest, like on your bike when you were a little kid. You didn't ride your bike with your kickstand down, but when your bike wasn't moving anymore and you wanted it to stay upright, you just put the kickstand down and it'll hang out. That's how we think about the heel. Actually, Mark, have you heard me say this? I don't think the heel is part of the foot.
No.
And Joe and I we don't disagree on it, but it's like controversial, I guess. But I don't think of the heel as part of the foot, because when you look at a dog or a big cat, like their heel is always up in the air. And then when they like sit on their butt, that's when their heel will drop. I think of the heel as the bottom of the ankle. So like if you think about this, like if you're going to walk on your hands, if you think about your hands or in your arms, if you're going to walk on your hands, are you going to put weight here right on your wrist? Because I think about this as the bottom of the wrist, right? So that's how I think about the heel as well, because you're going to walk on that front part of your hands. Like I have calluses, they're all here. So that's just how I think about the foot. And it's a controversial thing to tell people that the heel isn't part of the foot, but it's provocative, right?
It's very
Gets
provocative.
people going. Yeah, Mark, you have any questions?
Yeah, I would say you mentioned the hips behind the ribs, was it?
Yep.
Something like that. So which I find to be maybe the most unnatural feeling part of trying to be conscious of that. And although I understand, well, a little why you're saying maintain the curve there in the lower back. So, but it's just interesting that it kind of looks a little funny on the videos, and it feels that's where I think the most strain, maybe not the right word, but the biggest change I would say in my back is, I think, that that's where the different feeling comes in when I'm conscious of, say, for instance, in the child pose, putting your rear end up, so that it's not dropping in. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's not really a question, it's
Cool.
just a comment. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Something that you can do to make the hips behind ribs feel less unnatural is don't think about it as like pushing your hips back. Just think about it as not locking out your knees or your hips. Because what a lot of people do when they stand is just lock out their knees and then they put all their weight on their heels. And that's gonna transfer over to their movement. It's gonna create compression, because that's what it is in a very simple sense, is compressing that knee joint and those hips. So if you just think about never locking out a joint, then it'll start to come more naturally. And that's the problem we see with a lot of stuff, right? Locking out the joints, triple extension. I don't know if you ever heard of triple extension, but it's a training concept where the goal of the movement is to lock out your hips, knees, and ankles at the same time. So it's triple extension. And people think of that when they run, or they think that that's what's happening when we run, but it's not really. When you look at injury resistant people, there's not there's not locking out of the joints. It's just the spine rotates one way and everything follows it. But then you will see triple extension in people who train for it, but then those are the people who are triple extending and getting injured too, because all hamstring issues, all hip flexor issues happen in triple extension, which locking out the hip, locking out the knee, locking out the ankle. Then there's no space for those joints to follow the spine. So yeah, it's just the injury stuff that we see. Um,
Another thing to think about too with the hips is, so like think you're like at the counter, I don't know, like washing dishes or cutting vegetable or whatever you're doing. And what happens is this is the front of the counter right here. If my hips are touching the front of the counter, if you notice that and you look down, you'll see the knees locked out, the hips pushed forward. It's kind of like Mitch is talking about. So a good way to kind of measure that and give yourself a visual and that feeling is, don't let your hips or your waist touch the counter, unlock the knees a little bit, and you'll kind of feel the difference. So you won't be like this, like what people like try to do, but it'll be a more subtle. And it just, it's like you're that far away from the counter, but it makes
Mhm.
it makes the world of difference, right? When you went through the assessment, you saw how little with the angle from the ankle, hip, shoulder, how little the angle would move, where it would, change it by like 10 degrees. So it's really like when you're at that counter, a good way to kind of see it is give yourself like 2, 3 inches and you'll feel it, you'll see it, and you just won't look like, like you're trying to push your belly out super far.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess like all in all, the biggest thing to talk, and I don't know if you have other family members, other friends that are struggling with back pain, um, but it's awareness, right? You're becoming a movement master just like us, just by talking with us on a weekly basis, and it's just awareness of how are you standing, how are you resting, and you don't really have to go into the movement things. The simplest recode, which it would take a long time, but the simplest recode is just change how you rest, change how you stand, and then your body will adjust to how you're tensioning it. But and that would take a long time, right? We want results fast. So that's why we put you in these positions, these active positions on the floor, on your feet, pushing into the wall, etc. But yeah, I don't know. What else? Got any questions? Would love to answer them. Got any questions about other topics? It doesn't have to be about this topic.
Sure. No, well, just one other question on the double line walk.
Yep.
So the video, it almost appears like the toe is dragging on the ground, but that must be an illusion, right? It's not. Yes? It
No,
wouldn't be.
it's not, but that is actually an old drill that Joe and I used to do a long time ago. It was called pinky toe drags. So it kind of does seem like that, but I think what you're just seeing is the last part of the foot that's down is that like third, fourth, fifth toe, because that's how we want that foot to leave the ground with that heel rising. But no, don't drag your feet because that'll just transfer over to your movement, right? And we don't want to drag our feet. But yeah, we yeah, I don't know. Maybe it just looks like that. I don't, but
Maybe
I mean,
it's
I figured
the
it can't
turf
really be
sticks up
dragged.
or something.
yeah. So on those double line walks, what you should focus on is pulling that leaving leg across your midline just to follow your spine over. And then your spine will switch and then your other foot will be on the ground, right? And it's just pulling the leg across here. I can actually just stand up and show you. Maybe I can get far enough back for this. So when you're doing the double line walk, we got those lines extending. You have one foot down. This leg, we want to be bringing along with our spine. So my spine's over here. We just want to bring it over here and then set it down because the spine's going to switch. And then this leg will just come over here. So it's just
Like you're
that.
very subtly bringing your knee to the opposite pec.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a cue we use is pull your knee to your opposite shoulder. Um, you won't be able to like get it all the way up there unless you're very supple. But
Yeah,
I think
you don't need
I
to
think
like
I would,
jank it through like that, but
yeah, I think I was almost, maybe I was attempting to keep my E straight. So that might be a helpful thing you mentioned there. that there's
Yeah,
a,
and what you'll notice actually is that your hip can work better when it's closing as you pull it up, because that's how those hip muscles insert, or that's how those hip muscles are sewn in your body. They twist inward when they're shortening. And that's actually, so that's the natural pattern of reset. So when you pull your leg through, we call that the reset. So that's the natural pattern, is for that kneecap to point toward the midline as you bring the leg through, and then the spine will switch over, and then everything will follow it, and you'll set that foot down. So it's just, yeah, and it's not something that you like need to get right away, right? It's just practicing, 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 and then eventually it'll be second nature. Like I can't really walk how I used to anymore. Like I have to think about it a lot to show a bad walk on a video. It's kind of hard. But yeah, sometime if you want to try this out, just just stand and pull your knee up straight. Like try to keep your kneecap pointed straight forward and pull it up, like do a high knee, and then try to pull your knee up and across your chest, and then try to point your knee out and pull your knee up, and you'll feel that pulling it up and across your chest is the easiest and the strongest feeling, because pulling it up while it's pointing out is like really weak, and that's because it's basically unraveling that muscle as you're shortening it, because our muscles are all just twists in our body, and if we untwist them while we're doing something, that's when the injuries happen. So it's like a braid, or yeah, a braid is a good analogy for it. If we untwist the braid, it becomes weaker, and when we see all the hip flexor injuries, people's kneecaps are pointing out when they're resetting, and that's where we get into issues. And then we have training that is promoting that, and it's just a vicious cycle of injury. Yeah, those are the differences. So he's bringing that leg through, kneecaps pointed out, versus Ed Reed bringing the knee through, kneecaps pointed in. And that's why
Are
Ed
you a
Reed.
Steelers fan? Yeah, so he probably hates this Ed Reed graphic right here.
Ed Reed.
But yeah,
Well,
that's the difference. Knee,
there's a
knee,
there's a
knee.
few good clips of Troy Polamalu. He was pretty nice. He was athletic. I'm sure if we look back at the Steelers of the 70s, that we would find a lot of good clips, because those dudes weren't doing all these crazy lifting based trainings. So
Dude, we should do that. Like one of these calls, just like break down an athlete. Maybe if Mark hops on, we'll do like Joe Green or something, see how he moved. But
no, we got to do Franco Harris
okay,
on the immaculate reception.
break down that film.
Yeah, because I mean, there's like 80 yards of running film right there, or however long it was. Do you remember that when that happened, Mark?
yes, the name Franco Harris, which I haven't heard in a long time. I mean, you guys weren't even born, so there you go.
We're just big fans.
Yeah.
Big
Huge.
fans of the game.
I'm actually a Broncos fan, so Ben Roethlisberger broke my heart when I was like 7. Because the Broncos were really good with Jake Plummer, but Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers beat them in the AFC Championship in like 2005, and yeah, it broke my heart. But
That would have been Ben's rookie year, huh?
I think it was his second year or rookie year.
I'm a
I think
Packer
it
fan, so
was
we
because
got you guys.
I think it was his second year, because I don't think a rookie quarterback's ever won a Super Bowl, and they
That
won it
might
that
be
year.
true.
They beat the Seahawks when they had Sean Alexander and Matt Hasselbeck. Yeah, good times.
Steelers, little Steelers talk on the.
Yeah, you guys are going to become DraftKings or something. Keep going.
I suck at sports betting, actually. I had to delete that stuff. What else? So what else is in your recode? Let's talk it out.
Uh, let's see. Toph. Well, let's see. Something. There's two variations. One is a fly, and one is Well, let me, I can recite it. Okay, child rockers, fly rockers, toe tuck rockers, the iso squat position, forward reach, and the double line walk.
Cool. Yeah, that forward reach gets your lower back going, huh?
Yes, and my shoulders must be very tight because it's a real effort for me to maintain that. Just the position, just standing there, looking through my fingers. Yeah, I know I'll get better at it. It's just remarkable to me how unaccustomed to like even reaching like that I am.
Yeah, and it realistically isn't something we do a whole lot. Um, yeah, like we don't have to reach out very much. We typically are reaching down and such, but yeah, it is hard. Like I'll find my lower back getting nice and tired if I'm in a forward reach too. But
Mhm.
and when you're in that fully tensioned squat position too, like there's not a part of your body that isn't tensioned. So it's a lot of metabolic work too. Like your body's using a lot of oxygen, your body's producing a lot of lactate, and but yeah, that's what we hear a lot too. Actually, um, Joe Mason just said like this stuff is very simple. Like it's not a lot of moving parts, but it's like very taxing to the system, which is good. We need to readapt. We need to recenter ourselves. What does Weck say? Um, not uproot, downroot. I don't know. He says something about stop uprooting yourself from your natural movement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But we're doing the opposite of uprooting. But yeah, cool. But how do toe tuck rockers feel? How do they feel on your feet?
The first time uh, my feet cramped, but the second and third times I did them, there was no cramping. It just was that first laying the foot flat, the top of the foot flat on the ground, and trying to push to the outside, right? And so then the bottom of the foot was cramping, but that's
Yeah.
fine. It stopped.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Yeah, that cramping is just your body adjusting. And then the fly rockers, did you have any hip cramping there?
No, I mean I could feel it kind of. I guess I would say deep, but is that where I'm like on going backwards, you press in, and I'm going forward, you're pressing out. I think, or it's the
Um,
opposite.
That's
It
more
was
for a child rocker.
no, yeah, that is the cue is as you rock back, you want to squeeze that ball.
right.
And then as you rock forward, you want to tear the ground apart. And then in the fly rockers is just when your feet are turned out just a little bit. So then we're getting deeper in the back of the hip socket. When I do fly rockers, because I've been like my kneecaps used to just point straight outward. So I still do a lot of fly rockers just to find that tension inward. But my hips cramp up and I can definitely feel it carving out space. So yeah, I just figured I'd ask because it's common. But yeah,
I cramp on those too, so
yeah. Then I just grit my teeth and
barrel through it.
it's good for you. It's good for you.
Something to look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Click the link in the description to join the Move Pain Free family and have a seat at one of our family table calls. And don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more information on how you can make memories without the back pain.